Sober on Purpose is the podcast that takes you beyond clean to fulfilling your dreams. Other programs get you sober. We ask what's next. Come thrive with us.
Hey, Jerry.
Hey, Tanya.
So we have this fantastic guest with us today. I think both of us are a little afraid of him. Not him, but the subject. So what we're talking about today is sugar addiction. And not only can you listen to this podcast, but there's going to be a Quit Sugar Summit on September 26th. So we wanted to have Mike Collins on to talk about that. Sugaraddiction.com is his website. He has a book. He has all kinds of videos. So we're being really brave and we're stepping into this. So Mike, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Well, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate you having me. It's always an honor to be on anybody's podcast. So thank you. This kind of starts, it's a strange way to start it, but it does start a couple generations back. My mother's mother died when she was only 8 years old. And she, it was terrible. I mean, she was a young girl. And when they got all through the grieving, they had to move in with her aunt, my great aunt. And across the street, they owned the country store. And anytime my mother went into that store, my grandfather had made a deal with his cousin Jim that she could have anything she wanted. Now, he had to work a lot. My great aunt was not the nicest person in the world. So she took a lot of comfort in that free candy across the street after her mom died. And she literally grew up thinking sugar was love. And this is, I think, one of the major issues in society in general and people and addictions. Because of its legality, people think of it as something different than it is and something different than science has proven it to be. So fast forward, we grew up with the ethos that sugar is love. And my mother passed away, I believe, of sugar addiction. Technically was Alzheimer's, but at the end of her life, she only wanted sugar. We couldn't get her to eat real food. And so, I ran into my childhood was just covered up with sugar. I mean, we literally had no governor on how much sugar we could put on our Cheerios or our cornflakes. We were scraping off half an inch with the milk and eating the sugar at the end. It was insane. Candy bars. My mother was like our compadre. I mean, it was just went on and on. Well, that's kind of a normal childhood, people would think, right? But 14 years old, I ran into beer. And I want you to remember this part of it. I knew that beer changed my state. I knew how it changed how I felt. I was kind of shy. I could drink behind the high school and then, go in and talk with girls or whatever. But I didn't realize, because I was only literally a baby when my mother started feeding me sugar, that it was changing my state and affecting my dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, was changing how I felt, right? So fast forward, I got sober at 28 and I went right back to the sugar, as most people do. It's actually in the big book of AA twice. I went right back to the sugar and Mountain Dews and, candy. I don't think I ate any real food, pasta, pizza, it was ridiculous. So I went on to have a regular career in sobriety, went to a lot of meetings and stuff, but I ended up, I met a woman in recovery and we had a couple kids, and I had read a book called Sugar Blues, and Sugar Blues was written by a guy who eventually married Gloria Swanson, the famous movie star. And they went around the world promoting this book in the early 80s. And so it was really a cool, anyway, I talked my wife at the time, and I don't know how. I mean, we were both in recovery, no flour, no sugar, no caffeine, in the womb or until they were 6 years old. It was a remarkable feat. And they had sugar once. I remember it till like it was yesterday. We were at a roller skating rink. They're twins. And like the cake and ice cream came out, right? And so we said, they both did. They didn't have to say anything. The music was loud. I couldn't even hear what they said anyway. They both look up at me like, and we just gave in. We had been fighting the parents, the grandparents, the Montessori school, the friends' parents. Everybody thought we were depriving these children of a life, right? A childhood, which I can tell you about that if you want, but that experiment was a success. Their brain developed so amazing. It's just an incredible story. But they always said I should write a book on sugar because obviously they never only had sugar in the house once a month. They didn't have a sugar in the house at all, but outside birthday parties for the rest of their childhood. And they always said I should write a book about sugar. So I did that in 2018 and it did well. And I opened sugaraddiction.com and I think it's been 12 years now. So whatever, 09, something like that. And I still had my career and stuff. So I gave out the best information on the planet, the best information I could find. And some people would take it and run with it. But at the end of the day, we didn't start to get successful till 2017, 18, when I started to coach people, started to form groups online. Now, this predates the pandemic, right? This is before everybody was on Zoom. We were creating these communities online. And, it's just kind of taken off from there. And I think it has a lot to do with the summits that you mentioned. About 7 or 8 years ago. We started doing them twice a year now because there was so much demand. But we have interviewed over 500 of the leading sugar addiction and sugar educators in the world, sugar scientists and sugar researchers. And so it's been, kind of that's how I became the sugar-free man. That's the story. And, I'm honored and blessed really because the science is catching up with kind of what Gloria Swanson and William Duffy knew in the early 80s. And there were books before that, but that's another history lesson we can get into if you want. But it's amazing, really. Now people are really finally discovering. And I do want to mention, since you guys are know a little bit about recovery stuff, what I've concluded at the end of this thing is this is a true substance use disorder. This is a substance addiction, and the real test is people who have recovered, lost 200 or 300 pounds, fall into a right-sized body, and they don't talk about their weight, their dieting, or their exercise, or the food they ate. They talk about the same thing people talk about in recovery, which is having to reconfigure their emotional system, their emotional management system. How they deal with themselves. It's almost like codependency recovery, to be honest with you. And then B, how they deal with others and how they deal with their life, their past trauma, and their stress. And if I had to focus on one thing, this changing of state and understanding that, in drugs and alcohol, if you started using drugs and alcohol 14 or 15, it's commonly known, you stop growing emotionally, right? And so this diet crap, if you will, is just that. It doesn't have anything to do with sugar addiction as it is known today. And that's the result of, tens of thousands of people we've worked with, and, probably approaching 1,000 that I've worked with one-on-one. So I don't know if that probably brings up more questions than it answers, but it'll get you started.
It brings up huge questions. So one of the things you said was, if it were drugs and alcohol, we would look at it and we would know that it's changing the brain. Right. Are you finding the same science for kids who have that kind of sugar addiction? Is it changing the brain in the same way?
Well, yeah, the last summit that we did last January was the Brain Science Summit. The Brain Sugar and the Brain was the name of the summit, and we had all of the educators on there who have gone through it, all the way from children to Alzheimer's, right? Like I mentioned, and people that have literally put Alzheimer's in remission, an incurable disease, when they followed the correct diet. Okay, and so yes, the science now is exploding day in and day out with new studies, peer-reviewed studies of people studying sugar. I mean, they're calling Alzheimer's diabetes 3 because the percentage of people that get Alzheimer's that had diabetes 2 is, I don't know, it's like double. I think it's triple. It's huge, the difference, right? So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a brain science thing. It's a brain disease. It's metabolic syndrome of the brain. Okay. It really is and one of the people we have on the summit this year, Chris Palmer of Harvard, is coming out with a book. It comes out November 15 called Brain Energy, and was one of the best interviews of 500 interviews I've ever done, where diet has, helped bipolar, schizophrenia, ADHD. It just, the list goes on, from people that change their diet and then change their mental state. So, yeah.
And one question I have is there any safe level?
Say it again. Is there any what?
Is there any safe level of eating sugar? I mean, is it absolutely everything out? Or is there any safe level? Because there are some people who can have a glass of wine and they're okay,
Yeah.
But is there any safe level of sugar?
No, it's a great question. It's a fair question. And I'll tell you the stats. I used to be the president of the Food Addiction Institute, and I've done these studies with the researcher. I've interviewed the folks with the studies. And it breaks down basically, strangely enough, like the diet or like the obesity numbers. About a third of people are, well, just like you say, they can have a glass of wine, they can have a little cupcake and not even worry about it. It's like they're, in the vernacular of recovery, they're called normies. Okay. We all hate them, but no, like, they're like, they can just, how do you just leave half a brownie? What I don't get. Anyway, then there's about a third that are what we call harmful users. And these folks, it's not their fault, but I mean, 85% of the stuff in the grocery store has sugar in it. That doesn't even include the blatant, candy, ice cream, and soda. This is just their food system, right? And so over the years, and this is one of our classic clients, they've just gained 2 to 3 pounds since high school or college. Now they're 30 to 100 pounds overweight. And they're like, I got to do something. And it's just the harmful user. Then there's the hardcore stone cold addicts. These folks, to answer your question, have to go abstinent. They have to have 100% abstinent, and like eternal vigilance. It's really a difficult process because you're the odd man out. You're the odd woman out. You're everybody's like, oh, have the cup. I baked it for you, but put the record book away. You've lost 50 pounds. But I have 1,000 stories. We've got 15,000 people in a Facebook group. Thousands of stories of people lose weight, off sugar completely for 6 months, have one little something, and off and back, then gain the 50 pounds back, they come crawling back in a year later and tell us these horror stories that all started with just the one, It's the same as drinking and drugging,
Well, and that's what I like on your book. You have a checklist for binge eating disorder.
Yeah.
Because you say in there, like we talk about in recovery groups, is not everybody faces this issue. Like you divided it into thirds. Not everybody is there. But for some of us, one is too many and 1,000 is not enough. That
Correct.
We just can't.
Yeah.
I'm that group that's lost the weight, put the weight, lost the weight, put the weight. And
Right.
all it will take is, you don't like brownies, but all it will take is one brownie. And
Yeah.
I'm done for 6 months or so.
Yeah, it creates cravings. It's just hard. The limbic brain it just wants more. It's hard, very difficult.
So one of the things that we found really hard, we have a story similar to yours. I couldn't eat sugar while the first child was in the womb because I just toss it back up. I wasn't tolerating it. And then we were building a house and we brought him out and he was probably close to 2 and we didn't have anything for him to drink. All we had was soda, right? And so we gave him his first soda and it was like everything just
It's like a horse from the starting gate, man.
Oh my God.
It just lit up. And we both knew it.
Yeah.
We knew it at the time. We're like, whoa, boom.
You could see it, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We
Yeah.
could see it. We could
Yeah,
really see
that's
it.
a great story. I believe that. That little body getting that sugar, they never have had it,
And
I've got a couple questions.
Yeah.
So my first question, Mike, is why are you out to destroy my life?
I get that question a lot, by the way. They're usually crying at the time. But it's okay.
He's just too manly right now to cry, but he will later. He's like, we're really doing sugar addiction? I'm like, yes, we are.
So, Mike, I'm assuming that you're not really drawing distinctions. I don't personally draw distinctions, and I'm assuming that you also do not draw distinctions between, say, cane sugar, beet sugar, raw honey, that kind of thing.
No, they're all the same.
Yeah.
What about dates? Are we in trouble with dates too?
Dried fruits are out completely.
What about the idea of the GI index, where if you're absorbing a substantial amount of fiber with the fructose, that it can kind of be like taking the antidote with the poison?
Yeah, no, I get a lot of pushback on this one. It takes a little bit of explanation, but in the early days, when you're trying to get off it, the fructose molecule, so you know the table sugar molecule is half fructose, half glucose, right? And so the fructose molecule is the offending molecule. And the fructose molecule is no different in a banana than it is in a candy bar. Same thing, same molecule. And you add ultra process to it, like coca leaves to cocaine, right? You're processing the stuff. And the processed stuff, I think, is worse. But it is the same molecule, but it is worse, I think. It hits it faster. It's already, like you say, it doesn't have any fiber. There's no slowing the process down. It's going right into the brain or right into the system and then into the brain. And so you have to think back that less than 300 years ago, the only fructose we ate, seriously now, the guy you want to listen to on the summit, the Quit Sugar Summit, is Richard Johnson. I might even have his book around here somewhere. Anyway, he's the world's most premier fructose researcher. And he's literally developing pathway blocking drugs to block the fructose, because the alcohol is fructose, right? It creates fructose. It creates a fructose path. And so when people begin the process of getting off of sugar, the high glycemic stuff creates cravings or keeps cravings alive. Now, to be honest, most people use low glycemic, blueberries, raspberries, the blackberries, that kind of strawberries, to help ease them through the first 30 days of withdrawals. It's almost like Suboxone a little bit. But some people at the end of the day can't use those either, myself included, because we've just sensitized ourselves. And remember, once a year, 300 years, we're talking, 7 million years of evolution and only 300 years of people eating any amount of fructose over once or twice a year. And when you read Dr. Johnson's literature, I actually asked the man this time, just a few days ago, it'll be on the summit, Dr. Johnson, is fructose a psychoactive drug? And he said, well, if I had to answer that on a multiple choice question, Mike, I would say, yes, it is. And so you have to realize that your brain is being affected. And when you listen to his research, you'll understand that when animals when they got near winter, they would hoard this stuff. And when they would start to use the fructose, they would do impulsive things. They would do dangerous things to get the food. It creates what he calls a foraging response. And the foraging response is they just eat as much as they can because they're not sure when they'll get food again, right? Mm-hmm. And this actual physiological process happens in human beings. This is science that's very unknown and no one really knows. The book's brand new. It's Nature Wants You to Be Fat by Richard Johnson. And so it's just, again, it takes about the arc of a podcast like this for people to kind of get the whole thing that we've been kind of immersed in for a decade. So I hate to be the deliverer of bad news, but you definitely can't drink fruit juice. You definitely can't eat dried fruit. You may be able to eat some berries, and some of our vegetarian friends are able to continue eating the berries, but they can't eat the high glycemic stuff.
So no oranges.
Well, let's look at navel oranges. Navel oranges don't have any seeds. They cannot be reproduced in nature. They have to be grafted, right? They have literally hybridized this product for what? for fructose because it's the sweetener, right? And so you have this giant fructose bomb that doesn't look anything like what an orange looked like 300 years ago. A banana would be indistinguishable to you. It's just a giant seed pod, the normal original banana.
Mm-hmm.
And apples were those little crab apples. Blueberries were those little berries, those wild ones, you know? And so through hybridization, they just kept getting bigger and bigger fructose counts. And it just, you know, it's, and this is a hard one because there's a great YouTube video called Is Fruit Good For You by Dr. Gary Fettke, Fettke. And he describes this much better than I do. But at the core, it was a marketing genius about 40 years ago. It used to be the green veggies, the green grocer. And somehow they put it together and had fruits and veg, right? And that fruits and veg were good for you. And I know this is a drastic viewpoint.
And grains right at the top, right?
Fruits and veg and grains.
Preferably wheat, refined.
Yeah, 100%. And you know, that we have four things we call borderline foods. Our vegetarian friends have to eat these as they detox because they have no other, they wouldn't have enough calories. And that's fruit, grains, dairy, and nuts and nut butters. And as you heal up from the sugar, like sugar is inflaming the insides of your body, wrecking your joints. You know, there's 100 maladies that it's associated with. And as you start to heal up 3 or 4 months in, you get through the psychological part, the irritability and all those kind of things. Grains will start to bother you, or nuts will start to bother you. You know, not everyone. Some people can continue with those, but you have to keep an eye out for them.
Wait. So one of the things you said earlier were blueberries are like Suboxone. I'm so sad. So for our audience that doesn't know, oftentimes when you're trying to come off of an oxycodone or some kind of medication like that, then they put you on a Suboxone to wean you off. People can get hooked on Suboxone. It's not necessarily the best option, but it may keep you alive. So you're saying that as you're coming down off of this sugar high, white flour high, all those types of things, that blueberries could be used. But if I hear you correctly, berries should not even be continued. Well, no, you're right. You use them to ease out of this thing if you need a little sweetness. And really, if you think about it, you need a little hit of fructose. That if you start using that vernacular and use the drug vernacular, it works better. I think I've seen it works better. So, but yeah, I mean, it does help ease it, you know, and not like the whole pint, like a handful. You know, so yeah, that's exactly correct.
Yeah. So you actually really sparked some thoughts in my mind. First of all, very captivating. You make a really solid argument and very convincing. One of the things you touched on was milk. Now, milk, I drink a ton of cow's milk.
Okay.
As somebody who tries to eat a gram of protein for every pound of body weight I have a day, it's a great tool to be able to drink some protein, right?
Sure.
Does breast milk have sugar in it?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. That's a great question. And that, you know, I think the cruelest joke the universe or God ever played on us is that breast milk is sweet and it does taste sweet. And so we do have and we are supposed to be attracted to these sweet things. Like Dr. Fettke talks about, like, when the things are ripe, the trees are ripe, animals will clean it in a day. Like they eat, like I the number Dr. Johnson gave me two summits ago was like 80,000 blueberries or something that a bear will eat, right? Because we are attracted to it. We're supposed to eat it. It's sweet. But as for your question about the milk and the lactose, lactose will sometimes keep the cravings alive. It will keep, and who wants to do this if you have cravings? Like, who wants to be sober if you're always craving alcohol? You know what I mean? No, you want to get peace. And so if it keeps the cravings alive, you have to do it. Now, and also milk has a different kind of weird anomaly in it, that in Northern Europe, Sweden, I don't know what your background is, but Northern Europe, Sweden, and north of, where it's cold all the time, human beings have had a genetic change where you read this, where they
Look
can
at me.
actually tolerate.
Come on. I mean,
You claim to be Italian.
I tolerate milk quite well.
Yeah, so then you'll probably be fine. That's fine. You know what I
But
mean?
it's hard for me to know because I eat sugar.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, you won't know this.
Look,
the ticket you won't know. The ticket to the game is 100% sugar abstinence. You make the decisions after that. And we need to get on to probably like the emotional part of this.
Well, before we do, one last thing. So
yeah,
what about vitamin C?
Vitamin
C, right?
Yeah.
So citric acid.
Yeah.
Medical and nutritional science is always rolling over on itself, but some of the most interesting stuff I've looked at recently is talking about huge amounts of vitamin C to be
right.
a truly healthy individual. Where would that come from if not from fruits?
Green veggies, green, kale, collards, Brussels sprouts, broccoli.
Really? Shocked.
You get calcium that way.
Plenty of vitamin C.
How are lemons and limes as far as tolerance in regard to this diet?
Yeah, lemons and limes are, a little bit in your water's fine, but yeah, it's not a, you don't want to be making lemonade or, limeade. It's a little lemon in your water is not going to kill you. It's probably good for you.
One more question before emotional, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm supposed to just be the eye candy here, so.
No, it's okay. You're doing fine. I got plenty of time. Don't worry about it.
What about artificial sweeteners?
That's an evil laugh.
When I was young, when I went to AA, they used to have these black belt men's meetings. Like they sit down, shut up, and don't talk. What you're describing is called what I call wiggle room, right? And wiggle room is like doing it your way kind of thing. And the thing with the sweeteners is really a little bit counterintuitive, because when the body gets a sweet taste, because it was likely mixed before, like with coffee and tea and chocolate, if you're using caffeine, sometimes it keeps the cravings alive too. With artificial sweeteners, it's exactly the same. What you have to do is divorce yourself from the sweetness that you know today. Like if something happens, like if you truly do this for 30 or 60 or 90 days and you don't have any sweetness, your entire palate changes. Carrots will taste sweet, peppers will taste sweet, macadamia nuts will taste like candy. You have to literally change your relationship to sweet, quote unquote, and that's the hard part. I mean, because we have grown up with such, what the bliss point is? So this is a manufactured perfect place that food scientists try to get to, that's universal. And what they rail against, and that's that something's too sweet, syrupy sweet, right? Or not sweet enough. So they're trying to find that middle ground, that bliss point. And what they've done is they've moved the humans, or at least the people that eat processed food or manufactured food like that, they've moved it to a place where it's artificially high. Our desire for sweet is artificially high. Like those crab apples aren't that sweet. Those blueberries, they're not that sweet, Yeah,
I think about it back in colonial or when we were colonizing the States, and sugar was so incredibly expensive
and rare. Yeah.
Right. And it would be locked up and guarded next to the gold box. And
it was a condiment then, not a
right. And if you had it at Christmas, you were lucky. If you had an orange at Christmas, you were lucky.
Right. Sure.
A banana was super exciting.
But in those same times, you would see lots of references to apple pie and stuff, and you're thinking they didn't even have sugar to sweeten that with. And now you're telling me that the fruit wasn't even as sweet. So yeah, I would agree. It makes perfect logical sense to me that the list point has moved. in an unhealthy direction.
Yeah, yeah.
But
And
what-
I'm assuming you're against federal sugar subsidies. I'm not talking.
Well, I'm a grassroots up and not a policy down guy. So I let them do whatever they're going to do. I don't have a lot of control over that. So we got to do our thing one person at a time.
Sober on Purpose is the podcast that takes you beyond clean to fulfilling your dreams. Other programs get you sober. We ask what's next. Come thrive with us.